Hey everyone, I am Jennifer Ocean Homestead, and I am going to show you how you can go to France while in Canada. Yes, there are islands in Canada that are owned by France. And when you set foot on these islands, you are technically in France. And make sure you have your passport because they can require you to show it. These islands are in Canada, but they are owned by France, and they speak French and have European plugs. When you go to these islands, you are setting foot on France soil, even though you're in Canada. And they're located just south of Newfoundland, and it's about northeast of Prince Edward Island and Nova Scotia. Not only do they have their own coat of arms, but they also have their own flag. 1536, Jacques Cartier claims the islands for France after their discovery by the Portuguese in 1520. 1670, France annexes the islands on which a few fishermen from France are encamped, naming them St. Pierre and Miquelon. 1700, repeated English attacks caused French settlers to abandon the islands. 1713, France cedes the islands to Britain as part of the Treaty of Utrecht, which ends the War of the Spanish Succession. Some colonists from Great Britain and Britain's American colonies settle on the islands. 1763, under the Treaty of Paris, which ends the 7 Years' War, France cedes all its North American possessions to Britain. Britain grants fishing rights to French fishermen along the Newfoundland coast, and as part of this returns St. Pierre and Miquelon to France's control. 1776 to 1783. After France enters the American Revolutionary War on the side of the USA, Britain briefly invades and deports colonists back to France and tries to establish British colony. 1802, the Treaty of Amiens returns the islands to France, but Britain reoccupies them when war breaks out in 1804. 1814, Treaty of Paris gives the islands back to France, though Britain again reoccupies them during the Hundred Days' War in 1815. 1816, France resettles the islands, and settlers are mostly Basques, Bretons, and Normans. 1941, Free France forces seized the islands after the islands' authorities had sworn their allegiance to the Vichy France government. 1992, an arbitrary panel awards the islands an exclusive economic zone of 12,348 square kilometers to settle a long-standing marine dispute with Canada over access to political oil reserves and fishing rights. In 2022, protesters opposed the COVID regulations and pelt the French PM with seaweed and stones. These are images I got from Google Earth, and you can see how close they are to the coast of Newfoundland. But also, it's not just two islands. If you really look close, there's actually a couple other side islands that are also included. These are images from Google Earth to give you an idea of what the islands look like from above. And now we are going to zoom in and check these out. This is an image of St. Pierre, which is the capital. And I've noticed that most of the housing and the people are in a very concentrated area and right close to the airport. So you can see there's some nice greenery areas, but the darker area is where most of the homes tend to be. I zoomed in on this area where it looks like most of the housing is, and even though it's a decent sized island, it seems as though the housing is crammed in one spot very, very tightly. These are images from the area where most of the housing is, and here is the sign. It is all in French. But then in a different area, I see a stop sign in English. This is an image from one of the roads in the area where most people live, but Google Earth does not state when they took these images. Now, this is where you can just go down onto the road and you can look around. So it does not give you that information. This could be old, it could be recent, I don't know. But based on what it looked like at one point in time, somewhat recently, hopefully, it does look fairly decent. It looks fairly clean. The roads look okay. And it gives an atmosphere of it's safe. It's safe to walk around. But I do see a little bit of graffiti in one spot. I don't find that appealing, but it's not too bad. So I don't know. Let's see if this looks like a decent place to live or even visit. In these images of a different road, the roads still look fairly decent. However, I've noticed cars parked on the sidewalk. So I would suggest if you are going to visit, especially if you're bringing a vehicle, maybe a good idea to be aware of the European signs. So maybe look up what the difference is between road signs and laws in France as opposed to, the country you're coming from. So for me, it would be Canada. And then maybe you can call and check and see if they have any advice to let them know that you're planning on visiting and ask them if there's anything you should know about any specific laws or bylaws or what is acceptable and what is not when driving as opposed to the country you're from, just so you can make sure that there isn't any problems or any confusion. And definitely maybe look up some common road signs in France and see how they may be different than the country you're from. This is something I found interesting because I've never seen this before. But at the intersection, and if you notice, their rows here are very close to houses. So they have a mirror on a pole at an intersection. And there is a stop sign at this intersection as well. So I'm not quite sure why you need a mirror, but maybe it's just an area where they have a lot of accidents. I don't know. But personally, I feel if you're approaching an intersection, you should naturally be aware of the vehicles that are already there and upcoming vehicles that are approaching. But I don't know. It's just me. Not sure why there's a mirror, but can't hurt. It's just an added safety feature. I found it interesting. And then we have a picture of some of the islands. And what I've noticed is that there's a lot of land that doesn't look to be used. So the housing and the businesses, they're all tend to mostly be in one little area, super confined, like a city. But there's a lot of areas where there's nothing. There are a few houses here and there out in like the country areas, but I don't see very many. So if you are considering maybe wanting to move to these islands or have a cottage there, it might be a good idea to look up who owns the land that is not being used. And if is it by the government and there's no option to use it? Or do regular people own this land and they're just not using it and it's possible to purchase it? That's something that would be good to look into and see if it's what are options and also what the laws are, because again, this is a different country if you're not from France. So if you're from Canada or the United States, then it's good to check and see what the laws are for even purchasing. And something to consider as well is that in some places, they have restrictions on who can buy property. For example, here in Canada, after they allowed the foreign countries and investors to purchase up our land in the masses and cripple our housing market and other things, then they finally now, after they purchased a ton of Canada and own a lot of it now, they put a ban. So if you want to purchase land in Canada, and you're not Canadian citizen, you cannot do that unless it's in an area that has a population under 10,000 people. So that's something a lot of people didn't know, because a lot of people from the United States would have a second home up here, and that was never a problem. But as of right now, it's not allowed. It's illegal. You can't do that unless what you're trying to purchase is in an area where the population is 10,000 people or less. So unless things have changed in the last year from when I bought this house, that is how the laws are now. And in the United States, they also have areas where if you are not a US citizen, you cannot purchase any land or property in a certain area. So that is something to also look into, is if from the country you live in, are you even allowed to purchase any home or property? And do you need a resident visa? How long are you planning on staying there per year? Those are some things that would be good to look into to help you make the best decision. In the early 17th century, it was settled by the French. Their proximity to the Grand Banks made this a prime location for one of the world's richest fishing grounds. The British and French fought over these islands for centuries, and control of these islands changed hands many times between 1713 and 1816, until the French took permanent control in 1816. The islands have remained French territory ever since. On the island, tours are available and you can learn about their role in smuggling alcohol into the United States during the 1920s. You can even walk on the same streets where Al Capone walked. Downtown St. Pierre has shops, cafes, and historical sites. Guided hikes around the islands are also available, and boat tours and whale watching is an option for further exploring. These two islands are just the main islands. There are smaller ones that are also owned by France. Accommodations are mostly locally owned guest houses. The currency used here is the euro, and prices are usually higher on the islands than in France. When traveling to these islands from outside France, you will need to provide your passport. There is a car rental service available on the island, but walking the islands are popular and often easier. There is no data network there, only call service, but with a Canadian SIM card, you may be able to pick up a signal from Newfoundland. Wi-Fi is available and mostly free of charge in the downtown area, and the time zone there is 1 hour ahead of Atlantic time zone. It's 3 hours ahead of Central Time. Outlets are European plugs, Type-C and E, 220 volts. You will need an adapter if you plan on charging your cell phone or your laptop while you're there. About 6,000 people live on the island. French is the language spoken, but some speak English, especially those working in the tourist area. There are 4 primary schools, 1 middle school, 1 high school, and 1 vocational school. The healthcare is public and free, and these islands contain authentic French cafes. To get to these islands, you can take a ferry from Newfoundland, or you can fly in a plane on Air St. Pierre from St. John's, Newfoundland, Halifax, Nova Scotia, Magdalen Islands, Quebec, Montreal, Quebec, or Paris, France. Here's an interesting piece of information. There is actually a TV show that was filmed in this area called St. Pierre. The following are pictures of these islands and showing the different housing and structures that are on them. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something new, and don't forget to share this out so other people can learn some random information, as well as hit that like button, leave me a comment, and if you like these kind of videos or any of the other content I have, make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video.